Matt Lenihan Boxing Social in association with Empire Fight Store and R Kings Competitions. We're here. The long-awaited return. Dan Rafael is back. I'm honestly absolutely buzzing to have you back on. We went through a stage of sort of every other month, maybe even more frequently, chopping it up about things in the States, obviously touching on the things here in the UK. So it's good to have you back on. How have you been anyway? How have you
I've been
been?
good. It's good to be back on with you, man. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Brilliant. Well, look, Dan, there's such a lot happening in the sport of boxing. I mean, if we only just look at the Ring Magazine Awards night the other night, there's only a handful of people I think who weren't actually there, and some of the fights that have come from it. Now, let's touch on. I want to touch on first this the Benavides fight coming up. In a couple of weeks, I think this is a terrific fight. Him, David Morrell, outside of obviously Canelo, who people want to see Benavides fight. I don't think from the outside looking in when I look at this fight, I think this is a really good fight. It's a competitive matchup from where I'm standing. Are you looking forward to the fight, and what's the take on it from the US side?
Oh, I'm most definitely looking forward to it. I'm going to be out there for the fight. I can't wait. It's, to me, one of the better fights you can make in the sport of boxing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, listen, we all wanted to see Canelo fight Benavides, maybe even see him fight against David Morrell. That was out of their hands. So I do give credit to Morrell and Benavides for saying, you know what, we can't sit here and just chase Canelo. He's doing his thing. Okay, that's fine. We're going to fight each other. So it's high
Mm-hmm.
stakes. They both make excellent fights in the ring usually. I mean, they're new to the weight class. So
Yeah.
if you're thinking about it, you know how it would have gone at super middleweight, and then you look and see how both of the guys performed in their light heavyweight debuts. Both of them have had one fight in the division. Listen, neither one of them blew anybody away. David Benavides fought against Alexander Vodzik. That was this past June on the Tank Davis Frank Martin undercard.
Yeah.
And while he definitely was a clear winner, dominating fashion, frankly, he didn't look great. And even David admitted that. But, things happen. He had some injuries going into the fight, had an injury during the fight, but he still got the job done. And in terms of David Morrell, also was not able to get a big time fight at super middleweight. And so he moved up to light heavyweight. He fought on the big Riyadh Season Card in Los Angeles that
Yeah.
was headlined by Terence Crawford Majimov. And again, he won the fight pretty handily. Didn't look particularly good against Hot Rod, but did the job.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're fighting each other. So, high stakes. And the great thing about it is you hear from Turki Alalshikh's perspective and these two fighters talking about, that they believe they're going to win and potentially move on to the winner for the true light heavyweight title against whoever prevails in the rematch between Beterbiev and Bivol. So
Yeah.
that fight itself sets up as a great fight, and it makes even more of an interesting situation if the winner can actually land the fight against the Beterbiev Bivol winner. So great matchup. Can't wait.
I see a lot of people talking about the predictions for this fight, and although everyone's sort of saying, look, it's as good as a sort of 50-50 on paper as you can have, a lot of people are going and edging towards Benavides, people talking about the pedigree and the experience. If you were to sort of give the advantage to one or the other, is there somewhere which way would you lean?
I mean, I would lean towards Benavides. I don't know if it's so much about pedigree because David Morrell has that deep amateur background from the Cuban
Yeah.
system. But David Benavides is, first of all, they're both in their prime athletically, just as men in terms of their age, even though David Morrell has so much fewer fights because he got a late start in terms of he left Cuba and not so much a late start, but he moved very quickly in the early days of his professional career. But he didn't really need to have 1,000 fights ahead of time because he had all that amateur experience.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Benavides turned pro when he was like 17 years old. So it was more of a work in progress to get him to the point. So when you look at the record and you see one guy's got, less than 15 fights and one guy's got, in whatever, 20 or 30 fights, you're thinking that guy is much older, much more experienced, but that's not the case. They're both, much closer in age, and in terms of the experience, the amateurs that Morrell has kind of makes up for it, whereas David Benavides got more of the pro experience. That said, I lean towards David Benavides more so just because I think that the combination of his chin and his power might be a little better than what Morrell has. Now, I have no evidence of that because Morrell is not like he's been knocked down or knocked out or, badly hurt.
Yeah.
I just sort of get the feeling that in a firefight, the guy that's going to be able to take a little better is going to be David Benavides. But, we'll see. I mean, that's why it's a 50-50-ish kind of fight because if you made me argue reasons that I could see David Morrell winning, I could do that also. It's that kind of
Yeah.
fight.
That's what makes it a good fight. The fact that there's so many, I think, intangibles in this fight where you look at both of them and go, well, I could see this happening on both sides. Look, We could talk about that fight all day, and look, it's coming up in a few weeks. We will catch up again. Outside of that, there's strong reports that a deal between Canelo Alvarez and Terence Crawford looks to be done. I think I can't remember if we touched on this before back in May at I think it must have been Canelo and Munguia fight week, I think was the last time we spoke. As that's sort of coming to fruition now, is there an excitement from your end, and what's your take on it?
I mean, it's the biggest fight, at least in American boxing, that can be made. I know Canelo's not American, but he's made his living in America, and he is a North American fighter. And if you take a look around and look at the possible opponents that he could fight, if you obviously take into account that he's not fighting David Benavidez or David Morell, and certainly not in the spring, early summer time frame, because they're fighting each other coming up in a couple of weeks. They wouldn't be ready for that time frame anyway. And you go down the list. Now, there's good contenders in the weight class and super middleweight that he could potentially fight, but I don't think there's anything that blows your mind and says, "Oh, I have to see that," or it's a big time mega fight or anything like that. So he's obviously out there looking for the biggest fight possible. He said he doesn't want to go to light heavyweight. The one caveat that he gave there was if Bivol were to be the winner in the rematch against Beterbiev, that he would be interested in having a rematch of his own to avenge his loss. Okay, fine, but that seems I'm not saying it's not doable, but it seems a little bit further away. Plus, they're not, their fight's still coming up, and there's not a lot of other guys there. And now you look at Crawford. He fought Madrimov at 154 pounds. He won the title in that weight class. Close fight, didn't look great. Getting a little older, also still really outstanding. Obviously, a top pound for pound type of guy. Looking for a huge fight. Like, what is there that can bring him the riches and the eyeballs and everything that goes along with it if he's not fighting Canelo? I don't see anybody at 154 that's a humongous fight. Although there's lots of good contenders, don't get me wrong, lots of fights I'd be interested in, but that don't necessarily get to the level where it's going to move the general public and do a million type pay-per-view event. Plus, I think, he was looking for that mega payday. He's locked up his Hall of Fame type of credentials. So he's looking for something huge also. It only makes sense. And Canelo is a promotional free agent. So is Terence Crawford. Terence did the fight with the Saudis and Turki Alalshikh in the last fight. Obviously, Canelo Alvarez was in London over the this past weekend, and met with Turkey as well. So I just think it's a matter of time till it gets done. And Canelo and Terence Crawford are going to make a mega fight, and they're going to get paid a shitload of money.
I think when you get to this point, when I was just about to say, is it almost, because Canelo's often referred to this as a lose-lose situation, like kind of thing. He says, because I'm the bigger guy. But when you're making this kind of money, like we're talking about money where this isn't about a split. This is Turkey probably going, look, what's the amount of money that will get you to fight him? Okay, we'll do that. Right, in a separate room. What money do you want to fight him? Is it doable? Yes, we'll do that.
Yeah, they're not arguing over percentages. And I will quote the great philosopher Floyd Mayweather, who had said to me and others, I remember what fight it was, but sitting there asking questions about the magnitude of the fight and the potential of losing, etc. And Floyd was real serious when he looked at us and said, "You know what, guys, when you're making that kind of money, there ain't no losers."
Yeah.
So, if you're gonna put, I don't know, I mean, who knows, $100 million or $50 million or $80 million or whatever the number is, it's a lot of money. It'll absolutely be the biggest payday that Terence Crawford ever made. I would imagine it will be the biggest payday for Canelo, just given what he's expecting. So, and it's a fight that the public will gravitate towards. It's the diehards are going to watch it, okay, obviously, but it's going to make an interesting event for the person that if there's whatever that community of so-called casual boxing fans are, they know the name Canelo Alvarez. I think at this point they at least know the name Terence Crawford. And they'll be like, oh, these are two big names, two great fighters, two Hall of Famers, two championship-level guys for a long time. And they're going to do battle. Let's see it.
Yeah, completely agree. I think it's one I'm really looking forward to. So fingers crossed that gets over the line soon. Just quickly on Turki Alalshikh and some of the moves he's making. And obviously, when you've got the type of money he has, maybe it's easy for people to say, well, he's got the money to do it. But he's changed the landscape of boxing over the past sort of 18 to 24 months. When you look at the fights, and it's always good to build a fight, I feel, but we often build it too long. Like Joshua Fury, for example.
We don't need it to marinate for 5 years is the point.
Yes, everyone needs to grow, but when it's time, it's time. This card on February 22nd, and I know you've been covering boxing an awful long time, but for someone like me, maybe who's only been part of this media setup for maybe 4 or 5 years, definitely when I look at the cards I've seen, and there's been some good ones, especially when you've got a really big main event. I can honestly say from top to bottom, I'm interested in every single one of them fights.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I will give credit where credit is due. It's easy sometimes for those of us who've done this a long time, are old and crotchety and cranky and yell at everybody to get off our lawn or, yell at a cloud. But you got to give the props. This is a great card, period. And it probably is the deepest card that I can think of in the terms of my time of covering boxing. And even in the times where I wasn't covering, the old standby when people refer to the great deep cards, and there's several of them. If you look back at many of the 90s pay-per-views that Don King did that had fighters like Julio Cesar Chavez and some of the Mike Tyson undercards and things like that, they were big, humongous cards. I don't know if any of them match this in terms of the overall depth. And like you said, the quantity and the quality, I'm interested in every single fight. And I don't want to sound like a promoter where I'm kissing anybody's ass, because I'm not. It's not like they're paying me for this, but this is just the reality. If you look at the types of fights that promoters and networks broadcast or stream these days, literally the main fights on that show, all, 6 or 7 fights? Like every one of them legit could be a main event. Like you can't tell me, even like the there's a couple of preliminaries with some prospects, but when you get to the main like title fights and eliminator fights and things like that, the first one on their list is, for example, Boatsi and Callum Smith. You can't tell me that wouldn't be like the main event on a card in the UK on, Sky Sports or on DAZN or something like that. That obviously would be. And then you go up the card, incrementally, and every single bout is that level. You're not Hamza Shiraz challenging Adames for a middleweight title. Wouldn't that be a main event on one of these shows?
They all would. They all would.
Madrimov against Virgil Ortiz, tremendous fight. I mean, Daniel Dubois against Joe Parker. Give me a break. That's a main event level fight. And the main event, obviously, is the main event, which is a rematch of a highly significant fight between Beterbiev and Bivol. I know I missed one or two of fights in there, but there's just all kinds of interesting fights. I don't want to sound crazy, by the way, Matt. It's almost like too much, because it doesn't give us and the fans enough time to really like savor the individual bouts and the buildup, because there's so many that it's kind of, again, I don't want to look a gift horse in the mouth, but I would not be unhappy if there was 2 or 3 of those fights that weren't on this card and they saved it for another show.
Yeah, I think just the main event in itself, and this is me talking probably as a hardcore, the main event in itself, you pay through the nose to see anyway, because of the high level quality of a fight it is. Dmitry Bivol and Artur Beterbiev. I think the first one was outstanding. Unfortunately, I wasn't there in person. I'll definitely be there for this one. We'll touch on that one because not enough time to run through.
But one other thing about that, by the way, the other aspect of that is, yes, even though these are pay-per-view fights, what Turki has done is he's charging or asking a far, far lesser amount of money. So I don't know if it's been announced, but I think that the Beterbiev Bivol rematch, at least in America anyway, I believe it's like a $30 pay-per-view.
Well,
can't really beat that.
Well, when you guys look, especially historically in the US, I know from our side we've been complaining if it goes over the £20 limit. But
we love that here.
Oh, I mean, I've been in America and they're like wandering around the casino. It's like, oh, it's $100. This, I'm like $75. I'm like, for what? The pay per view. And I'm like, that's it's mind blowing. So the fact that I think he's even tried saying that, I don't want to misquote him, but the Conor Benn fight that's coming up, obviously that will be pay per view, but I think he's trying to cap that at $19.99, which is
exactly.
I mean,
and I don't know, they haven't announced this or not or anything. I think that while Conor Benn and Eubank in the UK is going to be £20 on pay per view, I think that around the rest of the world it's not a pay per view, because there's no reason for that to be a pay per view in the United States. Nobody will buy it.
I was just about to. We'll come on to that now. Then we can talk about Bivol and Beterbiev another time. But that fight there, obviously, in terms of the UK, I think everything that went on with the first fight and the fact with the tests and everything that's gone on in the build up, these two obviously have built up this animosity and etc. And there's the family legacy, the history. But from the US point of view, we see this and go, as a fight fan, I'm quite interested to see what he do against Barrios. But I know that the money is this fight. And this is a monster in the UK. From the US, what's the interest levels from what you hear? Do you have other reports of people going, oh, I'm interested in that, I will go to that?
Yeah, I mean, those of us who are the diehards, of course, we're interested. But, being quite honest, it's very hard to say that Conor Benn against Chris Eubank Jr. is in any way going to sort of penetrate that wall of the casual fan, like a Crawford and a Canelo would. Or even if it was a bigger fight in America that involved, an American fighter. And it's no knock on those guys. They don't have a fan base here. It's not a world championship fight. When it comes on, it's at an unusual time for those of us in the United States who are used to watching our weekend boxing at a certain time of the evening. Because of where it's going to take place in London, it's going to be much earlier here in the United States. And you combined all of that together, and it just is not conducive to a highly big event here for the fans in this country. Now, for those of us who are the diehards, of course, we're going to be interested. And I rather like watching the fights from the UK here because they're on early for us, as opposed to, super late at night, or, when I watch fights from Japan and they're on, at 5 o'clock in the morning. This is like the sweet spot. It's on like 5, 6 in the late afternoon, early evening. So I'm good with that. But it's still a mega fight in the UK. And those of us that are interested would definitely can watch it here in the United States. I hope that they do the right thing, though, and don't make it a pay-per-view in the United States, because it doesn't warrant that. The example I was thinking about, this is just off the top of my head, back, when, take, for example, when Devin Haney fought Regis Prograis. Here in the United States, they did that as a pay-per-view. But everywhere else in the world on DAZN, it was part of the regular subscription. A Chris Eubank, Conor Benn type of fight, for me, in America, is the type of fight I expect, is why I'm paying over $200 or $250 a year to subscribe to DAZN. You have to give your viewers some kind of A-level or a really big-time fight once in a while, at least. It's not going to be on pay-per-view. Like, I get why they're doing Beterbiev Bivol and that whole massive card on pay-per-view, obviously. I get why they do an Usyk and a Fury rematch or a first fight on pay-per-view. Get that, no problem. Yeah. But in America, anyway, Conor Benn and Chris Eubank Jr. absolutely should not be a pay-per-view, and I hope that it's not. They haven't made that announcement yet. They still got to, I guess, do the formal, announcements of press conferences and press releases and all that stuff. But I guess we'll have to see. But I suspect that, at least in America, it won't be a pay-per-view.
Yeah. Sidebar to that, since we last spoke, there's been 2 retirement announcements. One who's still fighting, one who very abruptly, the day before last, did a 20-second video, I think, and said, look, that's it for me. Now, we've seen this before. We'll start with Tyson Fury. We'll move on to the other person in a minute. But we've seen this before. There's a lot of money on the table for a Joshua fight. Yes, in terms of these two aren't at the peaks. These two haven't got world titles. But like Eddie, not to quote Eddie, but we all know that fight, like the Benn and the Eubank fight, especially in this country, and maybe a little bit more in the US than the Eubank-Benn fight, that is a monster of a fight. Can you see Tyson Fury walking away without fighting Anthony Joshua?
Anything is possible, but if you examine the history of Tyson Fury's career, he has announced, at least I counted 5 different retirements, including the one from the other day. And it might even be more than that for all I know, but it was definitely at least 5. And he's always come back. Number 2, one of the things he's often talked about in the last number of years is that, well, yeah, it's cool to be champ and everything. He's always talked about getting paid and making money. That was more his driving force than being champion, which once he had become champion, I guess I can understand that. You've done that, but now it's about making the money. And while he has made, astronomical amounts of money over the last several fights, it's hard to believe that he's going to allow that fight to get away from him, where he can make a gigantic pile one last time against the opponent that his whole country wants him to fight, that he's been asked about for years, no matter who else he was fighting. When he fight Anthony Joshua, and he's still really good. Yeah, he lost to Usyk, but it's not like he got, knocked out in the first round. He certainly didn't get knocked out the way Joshua got knocked out by Dubois. I'd rather say that if they actually have the fight, that, despite the 2 losses in a row, Tyson Fury is going to be the favorite in that fight. And I'll just remember when Lennox Lewis was, this was not because he was retiring, but when the Mike Tyson fight was still sitting out there. That tells you how old I am. And Lennox would always, when the fight was made, and they had to jump through hoops to get that fight made, because it was a different time, but you had the competing broadcasters that had exclusive contracts with them, and it was a very complicated deal to make for a variety of reasons. In the end, it came down to Lennox telling his people at HBO, I need this fight because I can't walk down the street anywhere and have anybody ask me anything other than, when are you going to fight Mike Tyson? And he got sick to death of hearing that. And I have to believe that Tyson Fury will never be able to go anywhere the rest of his life if he doesn't do this fight without people asking him, why didn't you fight Anthony Joshua? Do you want to go through the next several decades of your life and hear that everywhere you go? Why didn't you fight Anthony Joshua? So, yeah, maybe he believed it when he made that video in the car the other day. Fine. I'm not going to say he's lying. But I think at the end of the day, The pressure is there. He's going to feel the itch like he has all these other past retirements, and probably come out and give the public what they want. Now, I'm never one, Matt, to tell any fighter that they owe the public anything in terms of a fight, because it's their life and their career. But I'm going to make the exception on this one because of all the shit that we've been through of them not fighting. And Anthony Joshua was on board, wants to fight. Tyson Fury owes his fans in his country this fight.
I think everyone still wants to see it, no matter what.
I think I just said your headline for this video.
I think you did. As soon as you said it, that was the pause there. I'm like, yeah, that'll work. Let's the other person. Oh, just quickly, Alexander Usyk. Let's touch on him. For me, I said after the fight, I was speaking to those people. I said, if you're him now, you're looking, you dominate the cruiserweight division. You have a stellar amateur career. You then go to heavyweight and you take on Anthony Joshua twice, beat him. Daniel Dubois. This is not in chronological order, obviously. You beat Derek Chisora. You beat Tyson Fury twice. You've been undisputed in both. When you get to that point, do you look and go, you know what? I've completed boxing. When you look at it now, he could have a Daniel Dubois rematch, and look, Joseph Parker's a live dog in that fight. I think people are majorly overlooking him, by the way.
I agree with that. I agree.
I think it's wild the way people are just assuming that, oh, well, this happens. I think Joe Parker's on a good run of form at the minute, and if he can be as sharp, I know he's been out in the ring a while, but if he's sharp, that is a terrific fight. But would you like to see Usyk do next? Is it if Nopataya steps up to heavyweight? What do you think? Would you be happy to see him sail off into the sunset?
I mean, if he wants to retire, I can't complain about that. You said he's done what he had to do. I remember when he moved up to cruiserweight in the first, or I'm sorry, when he went from cruiserweight to heavyweight, doing an interview with him and him talking about his goals as a fighter when he turned pro. He had won the gold medal, which was a goal that he had set for himself in the amateurs. He wanted to become the undisputed cruiserweight champion. And he very specifically talked to me about how his idol in boxing was Evander Holyfield. And he wanted to do what Evander Holyfield did, which was not only be the undisputed cruiserweight champion, but match him and also be the undisputed heavyweight champion. Yeah. So he did that. So, he could retire, but he also was in a situation where he's still top of the game. He's still outstanding. He's still he's number one heavyweight in boxing. I think a lot of people will tell you without question he's number one pound for pound, and he can make a gargantuan pile of money, to set himself up and generations of his family for a long, long time. He already should have made big money, but there's still other fights he could do. So while there isn't one mega fight that stands out to me, because it's certainly not going to be another fight against Joshua or Tyson Fury at this point. And Opataya would be intriguing, but that's probably a little ways away because he's still got some unfinished business in the cruiserweight division. So for my money, it's sort of like, talk to your people, talk to Turkey. Who do you want to see me fight? Line them up. If it's a fight against the Dubois rematch, because Dubois at least has sort of earned the position because he's won, some good fights since he got beat by Usyk, in a pretty one-sided fashion. But the winner of Parker and Dubois is certainly legit. Or just go down the list. You want to fight Ajit Kabiel, or if you want to fight Martin Bacoli, you want to give a chance. Pick a heavyweight, pick one of these guys that's on the contender list. Like if Zhang beats if he wins the fight again, he's fighting Kabiel. If he wins that fight, do a fight with Zhang. I mean, the point is there are still another 4 or 5 quality heavyweights that he hasn't faced. That again, they're not going to be as big commercially, less necessarily as a Fury fight. Okay, but not every fight is that level. But you can still definitely test yourself and make a shitload of money and put on a great event by fighting, another top contender.
Yeah, I agree. The last one I wanted to touch on, Gervonta Davis. So he's come out and said, look, this last year, we see it with everyone. Floyd retired, came back. I think he had 2 retirements, maybe 3. Says, I want to go, I want to leave, must be on my own, all this kind of stuff. If he retires after this next year, do you expect him this year, if he does, is it for you now and everybody else, we want to see the Shakur Stevenson fight, we want to see a Ryan Garcia, we want to see the Haney fights, we need to see these fights before you do leave, because everybody's talking about these fights. Whenever I ask anyone, especially this side, take away everything that Turkey's done, who do you want to see? They go, I want to see Tank and Shakur.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously a great fight. I don't necessarily think he needs to have another fight against Ryan Garcia. Their fight was pretty conclusive. But there are quality opponents for him, both in the lightweight division, Shakur being one of them. There are certainly good opponents if he decides to go to 140 pounds, where he's been in the past, although briefly, and did win a belt. So there's, good fighters in that weight class as well. A Teofimo Lopez, for example. But
Yeah.
there are still a number of fights that Tank can make that would be big events that he can make, a lot of money. Now he already makes big events, makes a lot of money already.
Yeah.
But there are ones that are bigger than that. It's like I think a Shakur fight. Obviously, Shakur's got to handle his business in the upcoming fight, and then I guess there'll be the Zepeda fight, which is the mandatory. Zepeda has been got injured in the last fight, so that's been put off for a little while. But there definitely will be fights to him. And look, Tank can talk about retirement, and if he does retire, respect to him for that. But he's not an old fighter. He's not a shot fighter. He's not in any way a guy that you look at and think of as a diminished fighter. He's at the top of his game right now in his prime at age 30. There's no reason why, he can't or won't want to fight for, quite a few more years. Now, you don't have to fight. They're only fighting once or twice a year anyway. And it's not like he's going to retire and, I don't know, he's not going to go become like a dentist or, a surgeon or, I'm just saying he's a fighter. That's what he's done his whole life since he's a kid. It's what he knows best and what he's really outstanding at. So when you have that opportunity and you can make the kind of money that he makes and you obviously enjoy doing it, it seems to me that all that retirement talk is, that's a lot of talk, not action.
Well, let's hope it does continue after the next 12 months. It's incredible to watch. It's always an event, no matter who he fights, which is the star power that he carries. Look, Dan, we haven't caught up in since May last year, so it's been a good one. This has been a good long one. We've talked about a lot. There's a lot of fights coming up in the next few weeks, and fingers crossed we will communicate and dissect them a bit further. But good to have you back, and long may it continue, my friend. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate that.